Welcome to our webinar series on the 12 voluntary targets for road safety. These are the voluntary targets, and in this series we look at each of the targets in turn and how NGOs can support their governments in achieving them. In this webinar, Caro Smit from South Africans Against Drunk Driving talks us through Target 9. By 2030, half the number of road traffic injuries and fatalities related to drivers using alcohol and or achieve a reduction of those related to other psychoactive substances. Welcome to you, Caro.
Hello, this is Caro Smit from South Africans Against Drunk Driving. I am an alcohol and drug educator and counsellor and the founder and director. And today we are going to be talking about drink driving and looking at some of the best practice solutions. So before we start, we really need to look at some definitions and abbreviations because it's quite a complicated and specialized field. So for example, alcoholism is interchangeable with alcohol dependence. That's what it's called now. Drunk driving is called drink driving now, and we will explain why. Accidents, as I'm sure you all know, we call crashes because they are generally preventable. BAC is abbreviation for blood alcohol concentration. BRAC is breath alcohol concentration. UOA is a unit of alcohol, and DUI is driving under the influence. So looking at the alcoholism or dependence, it's important to know that there's often a family history of addiction. It is an illness. So I know in Sweden, because their drink driving has gone down so dramatically, they concentrate very much on people who are addicted. What happens with a person who is dependent, and that's very important for drink driving, is they have a thing called increased tolerance, which means they are a practiced drinker. They can drink much more than others without feeling or looking drunk. They can drive, albeit in an impaired way, with a BAC which would make others unconscious or dead. So that's very important to know because a lot of people say, I will only stop driving when I feel drunk. But with practice drinkers, they often are intoxicated, but they don't feel it. Blackouts mean they do not remember part of the evening, and so that's important for crashes because they don't remember the details of the crash. Looking at some definitions of dependence, one of the main definitions of dependence is the loss of control of one's drinking, which causes problems to the body, to finances, to work and study, to the family, and society, for example, like driving under the influence. In my work with alcoholics, I generally found that there were a few different types. So the type that people usually think are the main types are actually the daily alcoholics. And some of these people, they may even seem to be fully functioning. Well, in fact, they are fully functioning. They're running large companies and they are leading a normal life, but they are still alcoholics. This now, people are saying, is about only 10% of alcoholics. So we need to look at the other types, weekend alcoholics. They only drink heavily at the weekends where there is a problem. And I know in many countries you will see that the death rate from DUI goes up very heavily at weekends. Binge alcoholics, these are people when there are periods of drinking and periods of heavy drinking. Sorry, there's meant to be periods of no drinking and periods of heavy drinking. So the binge alcoholic might not drink for 6 months, and then they are drunk for 2 weeks, where their work is impaired, their studies are impaired, their finances, their body is impaired, and their driving is impaired. They are still alcoholics. One of the more recent type is the periodic type we're seeing, often in youngsters, in the people sort of in like their late 20s or early 30s. So sometimes here the drinking is okay, but at other times there is a loss of control. which causes problems. So one needs to understand the complexity of alcohol before you can fully understand drink driving. So basically, proper and accurate education is needed about units and what they come to in blood and breath, and also to know the elimination rates of alcohol. For example, traffic officers often ask drivers in roadblocks, "How much have you had to drink?" And the driver answers, "1 glass of wine," or "2 beers, officer." So the officer thinks, they haven't had a lot to drink, so they can't be drunk or over the limit, and he says, "Okay, drive on, please." The driver thinks, "Phew, lucky this time, shows I can get away with it and I can do it again." So talking about one drink is very inaccurate, because what is one drink? Look at this picture. Is that 440 mils, or 750 mil, or 500, or one of the new ones, which is 1,000 mils? They are, after all, only one drink. So in different countries, alcoholic drinks are called different names: units, standard drinks, drinks. NGOs will need to check that the values and names are accurate and standardized and are not approximated. For example, people often say you can drink 2 beers and be under the legal limit. But as you saw, if they're 2 large beers, you will be over the legal limit. Alcoholic contents of drinks also vary. So if you look at the drinks, it could be 40% or 5% or 12%. And what does that mean? So it does not mean that only 40 mils of the drink is alcohol, or 5 mils or 15 mils is alcohol, etc. So what we need to check is how much of the drink is pure alcohol. It is a simple arithmetic sum to work out the amount of pure alcohol. So you take the percentage of the alcohol times the volume, and then to calculate the units, you divide by 10. So for example, a 5% beer in 400 mils comes to 20 mils of pure alcohol, or 2 units. The wine of 12% in 175 mils comes to 2 mils of pure alcohol, which divided by 10 will come to 2 units. Whiskey or vodka at about 40% in 25 mils, which is generally a standard tot, comes to 10 mils of pure alcohol, and that comes to 1 unit. But which is the glass of wine? Is it the lady's wine, or is it the man's wine? So that is why you should not talk about a drink. This is very inaccurate. One needs to talk about units. So the small glass of wine would be 1 unit if it is 125 mils. And if it's a large glass of wine, it could be, if you look at that glass, it could be 5, 10, 15 units. So generally, we need to talk about units and be quite accurate about it. In some countries like Australia, they have a line drawn onto their glass because the sizes of the glasses vary so much, and it will show you where 1 unit is. So if you choose to drink a large glass, for example, a glass that has 250 mils of wine in it, you can see that the 1 unit is clearly marked, and then you know that you've got to wait much longer before you could drive, or you could know what your blood alcohol concentration will be. We need to understand that women are different to men. Women need to drink less than men because alcohol is diluted by water and it's not absorbed into fat. So women's bodies generally have less water, we have more fat, and so the blood alcohol level are generally higher than in men. Women who drink heavily also have more chance of developing liver and other problems, breast cancer, problems with the womb, ovary, and tubes. But now we need to look at units and drink driving. So 1 unit generally comes to 0.02 grams in 100 mils of blood, or 0.10 milligrams in 1,000 mils of breath. This is obviously standardized for a male who weighs approximately 68 kilograms. So basically, when we want to now teach the correct elimination rates of alcohol from the blood, so what eliminates alcohol? Time, 1 unit per hour maximum. Coffee does not remove alcohol. All coffee does is makes the person a wide awake drunk. Water does not remove alcohol. Running around the block does not remove alcohol. Sleep does not remove alcohol. The only time sleep removes alcohol is, for example, if you drank 8 units of alcohol and then you slept for 8 hours, the alcohol would be out your body, but that's not because of the sleep, it's because of the time. A fatty breakfast does not remove alcohol. Only time removes alcohol, 1 unit per hour max. But remember, if a person drinks a huge amount, it can be much less than 1 unit per hour. So generally one has to wait much longer. So for example, if someone drinks a bottle of spirits, which comes to 32 units, they are only sober 32 or more hours later, and so will drive under the influence the whole of the next day. This is very important to know for drink driving, because that's why one needs to test in the morning, one needs to test at night, one needs to test at lunchtime, because of the residual alcohol that will still be in a person's body from drinking beforehand, or the day before even. Okay, what I'm going to do now is just show you how to work out the time, amount to drink, units of alcohol, and what it comes into blood alcohol concentration. It's just quite a nice little graph. It's something that's very nice. You can make your own according to your own drinks in your country. It's very nice. You can get people to work out when they've drunk something, what it comes to, how long it'll take before they get sober. So we have a drink in South Africa called Black Label beer, which is 75 mils, and it comes to 4 units. Remember, 1 unit is 0.2 in the blood alcohol, and it takes 1 hour to eliminate. So at 7 o'clock, if a person has 1 quarter Black Label, that comes to 4 units, and their blood alcohol will come to 0.08. If they have another drink at 8 o'clock, they have 1 more quart. So it's 4 units is carried forward from the hour before, plus 4 units, minus 1 unit for the 1 hour, which then equals 7 units left in the body, which comes to 0.14, which of course is over the legal limit of, in both America and the countries that have 0.8 or the countries that have 0.5. At 9 o'clock, person has 1 more, so they carry down the 7 units from the hour before, plus 4 from the new quart, minus 1 unit for the hour, so it comes to 10 units, and basically their blood alcohol level comes to 0.20. Way over the legal limit. So you'll see if there are 10 units in their body, for the person then to be completely sober and safe to drive, they would have to wait at least 10 hours before the alcohol is completely out the body. So remember, it's the alcohol that affects the driving, not whether the person is drunk or not. And that is why it is now called drink driving. Because even 1 unit affects driving skills. So the safest driving rule is 0 alcohol. Why it's the safest is that there might be other drivers on the road who are intoxicated, or other drivers who are texting, or there might be pedestrians on the road. Pedestrians might be drunk, they might be not visible, there might be cattle on the road, there might be potholes. So generally, when one is driving, one needs to be incredibly aware of what's happening around you. And the only way that you can really be completely in control is to drive with zero alcohol in your system. So people need to understand and be taught how alcohol impairs judgment and the ability to drive a vehicle safely. People so often say, I drive better on alcohol when I've had a few drinks. That's impossible. So these are some of the myths you have to dispel. What units are and how alcohol is eliminated, the relationship between drinking and the blood and the breath alcohol limits, the probability of being detected whilst driving impaired, the punishment, fines, disqualifications, and impact on livelihood and social standing, the cost of DUI to the economy in terms of DALYs, daily adjusted life years lost, and the effect on the GDP of the country. So it's very important to have education and enforcement. Now let's look at the world's worst countries for drunk driving. So these are the percentage of road crash deaths involving alcohol in 2015. You will see here, for example, in South Africa, the drink driving rate was put down at 58%. The next highest was 34%. Now let us just look at those statistics, and you need to look at your own country. In South Africa, the drink driving is only actually written down for drivers who have died. They're the only ones who have been tested. So the 58% comes from the dead drivers. They do not include drivers who have not died. They do not include people at crashes. They do not test both drivers. So the statistics are basically really underreported. Whereas if you look at Canada's statistics are exceptionally accurate. They test both drivers. They do a lot of testing. And so you need to work out in your country, are your statistics accurate, do you think? And one needs to then discuss that with the powers that be, or if you are talking to the media. If you're looking at best practice, drinking and driving, a road safety manual for decision makers and practitioners has been put out by World Health Organization. You can download this, and it goes into all the things that one needs to do to develop a good drinking and driving program. Let's just quickly show you that how alcohol is tested. So after you're drinking, alcohol can be measured in the person's body in two ways. So it can be measured from the breath. So what happens is, of course, when a person drinks alcohol, it goes into the blood, it goes into the brain. After that, it goes into the lungs, and part of it is eliminated in the breath. Other parts are eliminated in the skin. Other parts are eliminated in the urine. So to test for breath, the breath test, they need 1,000 mils of breath. That's why they have to take in a very deep breath and blow for a long time. These breath test results are very accurate, and the results are available instantaneously. So that's very good. They're called evidential breath testing machines, or otherwise alcohol can be tested in 100 mils of blood. In some countries, the blood testing can take a very long time. It can take 12 months or longer to be analyzed. It is also much easier if there is collusion or corruption for these blood results, for the blood to be either stored at the incorrect temperature or tampered with. or signs are not formed properly, forms are not signed properly. So that's why breath alcohol tests are exceptionally important and good to use. And then if necessary, in crashes or deaths, one can use blood as a backup. So the screening devices, generally at a lot of the roadblocks, they use screening devices which are not evidential. They cannot be used in court. So basically, these screening devices are very quick to do. They often do not need mouthpieces. They can be in the appearance of things like the eye tube, like a torch that is put in the car. But one thing one needs to know about the screening device is that they can give the results either in breath alcohol concentration or it can be converted to blood alcohol concentrations. So it's very important for the officers and for the people to know what the result is actually given in. Because in some countries, people have been prosecuted for example, having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.3, or let's put it 0.2, because they said that is way over the blood alcohol concentration. Meanwhile, if it was the breath alcohol concentration, which is generally 0.04 milligrams, they would be under the blood alcohol, breath alcohol concentration. So it's quite important to know what results the screening device gives, whether it's breath alcohol or has been converted to blood alcohol. Evidential breathalyzers, here the results are given as breath levels in milligrams per 1,000 mils. These tests are exceptionally accurate. If the law has been passed in your country, if they are legal, they can be used then in court as long as the officer has been trained how to use the evidential breathalyzer and as long as the machine has been calibrated at the correct time and is kept at the correct temperature. They are also very good because it's very difficult to forge anything. It's a computer. The person's name goes in, their identity goes in, the officer's identity goes in. A few copies come out, and so the offender gets a copy goes into the file, and a copy can be saved somewhere else so that there is very little corruption. These are used in many countries in the world, and basically it would be nice if they could be used in every single country because they are very quick. Let's then look at the WHO, at the blood alcohol concentrations, effect on driving, and chances of a crash. So 0.2 is best practice, obviously, for novice and professional drivers. There is a slight impairment of judgment, and the chance of having a crash are twice. So that's why we say that the only safe rule is 0 alcohol. If you're looking at 0.05, which is WHO best practice, there is decrease in various blood center functions, inconsistent effects on behavioral task performance, decrease in judgment and abilities, and the chance of a crash is 4 times higher than 0. If you look at 0.14, there's impairment of balance and movement, impairment of visual functions, slurred speech, vomiting, especially if this BAC is reached very rapidly, and the chance of having a crash is 18 times. When we go to 0.20, there is severe sensory impairment, including reduced awareness of external stimulation, severe motor impairment, for example, frequent staggering or falling, and 80% chance of a crash. Now, if you go back to 0.2, basically a lot of the deaths occur at 0.10. If you're looking at well, certainly in South Africa when they did the research. So one needs to know that the impairment at this time is very severe and causes great many crashes. If you look at 0.40, this in the books, it says non-responsive stupor, loss of consciousness, anesthesia comparable to that of surgery, and death for many. Once again, let's remember about the alcoholics or the alcohol-dependent people. These dependent people, because they are practice drinkers, they can get into cars, they can start the cars, they can drive the cars, they can very often get home quite safely, but they are very, very impaired. And it's important to really look at this and teach people about dependent people, because this is often used in defense cases for the accused by the defense lawyers, because they will look at a chart like this, and it doesn't say on the chart about the dependence and the practice drinking. So one has to really discuss this and tell people about it. At this level, the chance of having a crash are 150 times. All right, so if you're looking at alcohol and drink driving, one has to look at commitment from transport departments and the government. There is an enormous amount of pain that is caused by crashes. But what we have to get is the political will and the road safety officials being committed to testing and harsher sentences, which will bring down DUI, will protect the rights of victims, will help convict the offenders, not feel sympathy for them, create awareness of the emotional and the financial costs of DUI to the economy and families. So let's now look at alcohol and its effect on vision. So here it's important to know that if there is no alcohol use, one has very good peripheral vision, which is very important for driving and seeing passing and parked cars and pedestrians. Generally, what I get people to do is to put their hands up on the side of their face, next to their ears, and go forwards, and that is called peripheral vision, which is very important for one if you're driving a car. Once you have had 5 to 6 units, peripheral vision is impaired. So your range of vision starts getting impaired. It becomes much smaller, and one's vision is blurred, so then you don't see parked cars or pedestrians. And that's why so often, even if a person gets home safely and wakes up in the morning and they might see that there are all these dents in their car and they don't know what happened, they might have actually hit cars on the way home. But because of their peripheral vision has been impaired, and because they might have had a blackout, they won't actually remember having hit that car, or even worse, having hit a pedestrian. After 8 to 10 units, the person becomes blind drunk. Here they have tunnel vision, they have double vision, they have night blindness, and their eyes wander all over the place. So this is generally what happens. At this stage, it's also very hard for them to see the difference between traffic lights, green, red, or amber, to know whether their lights are on, and obviously to see people. So what changes driving behavior? Basically, behavior only changes because people are afraid of the legal and financial repercussions of their actions. So basically, they have to be tested and tested and tested. They have to be fined. They have to have licenses suspended. Only after that starts happening and is reported on in the media and by everybody will the behavior change. let's look at who are the main offenders so we know where to start. Males tend to drive more than females. Inexperienced young adults and teenage drivers are some of the offenders. 18 to 24-year-olds, low socioeconomic grouping, single or divorced, blue-collar occupations, lower education or limited literacy. So there you'll see there, people don't know about units, they don't know the difference, they might not know what the blood alcohol level is in their country, they think that if they don't feel drunk, they're okay. So you'll see those where education is important. Low self-esteem, they might need the alcohol to boost their self-esteem. And alcoholics and alcohol-dependent people, they're often the repeat offenders. So if you look at a country like Sweden, where it is very, very socially unacceptable to drink then drive, the people who they are finding are the people who may be drinking and driving now are the alcohol-dependent people. So there is a large, concentrated effort working on alcohol dependence, trying to get people off alcohol, looking at repeat offenders. So alcohol-dependent people, because of their need for alcohol and because, of course, they might be drunk technically under the influence the whole time, would be more likely to be the main part of the main offenders. Other high-risk situations are obviously things like sporting events, soccer, rugby, cricket matches, baseball matches, football matches where people go there and drink before them, festivals where drinking is allowed, and payday weekends are very important because death rates go up dramatically at payday weekends because more money is available and then people can binge over that weekend and so they can drink and drive. Or the other thing which we actually haven't discussed at all here but is very common in many countries is drinking then walking. So that payday weekends, even if a person doesn't have a vehicle, they may be walking across highways intoxicated, and so payday weekends are also times to do more testing and be aware. So let's look at drinking and driving reduction, looking at the different elements and looking at the effectiveness according to W.H.O. So road safety crash data and assessment is very effective. We need to know that for our country. Laws on blood alcohol and breath alcohol levels are very, very high. They need to be in best practice. Strong enforcement of the drink driving laws are very effective. Strict and swift punishment for those who break the drinking and driving laws is very, very high. So, for example, if a country is using blood alcohol and it takes 6 months or a year for the results to come back, in that time, the person starts to justify their behavior, and so the effectiveness is not as good. So you need the strict and the swift punishment. Public information and education is only high if it's combined with the enforcement. Monitoring and evaluation is also very high. What is working in the system? Is this working? Is that not working? So it's no use doing something 1,000 times if it is not working. One has to monitor and evaluate the situation. Some more effective elements: lower blood alcohol for driver groups such as bus drivers or young drivers is very high. Laws prohibiting alcohol sales at certain locations and times is mediumly effective. Initiative to control alcohol access and distribution, medium effective. Graduated licensing for novice drivers is medium to high. And this is very important if you look at low and mid economic countries where more and more people are having access to finances and to vehicles. So a novice driver could be 18, 16, 18, or they could be 40-year-olds. And so it's very important to look at that. And I think and in those cases also to have plates on the vehicle so that officers can see, for example, this person of 50-year-old has got a P number plate on their vehicle, and that person needs to be tested, and they need to be either on a lower blood alcohol level or 0 level, according to what is the law in that country. Employer programs are medium effective. Vehicle sanctions have medium effectiveness. Employer programs, medium effective or low effective here. A lot of these employer programs they are often very good in terms of bringing down alcohol abuse, not so much the drinking then driving. Treatment for repeat offenders is also low to medium, and school education programs are very, very low because the school education programs are not working with the enforcement. So if you do them just the education on their own, they are low. They still do make there is some value in them, but the effectiveness is low. So one should really try and concentrate on the elements that actually have the highest effectiveness. What works to reduce? So let's go over it again. Setting the blood alcohol levels, 0.5 or 0.2 for professional and novice drivers. Enforcement of them, police and traffic officers to have breathalyzers in the cars so that they can test and check so if they find a car that's speeding, do a breath alcohol test. If they're checking tires, do a test. If they're checking licenses, do a test at all times. So every police and traffic officer should have a breathalyzer in their vehicle. Random and selective breath alcohol testing, they need many, many tests. So if you have, for example, 1 million drivers, one should do at least 1 million tests a year. So it's very important to do testing and testing and testing again, so that the chance of a person drinking then driving is low so that they are tested. Severity of punishment is important. Need suspension of licenses, high fines, penalties, and imprisonment for causing death and severe injuries. Swiftness of punishment. That's why the breath alcohol testers are accurate and preferred. Consistent, swift testing. So in the United States, they have special drink driving or traffic courts so that they get the people there quickly, because the other courts might be clogged up with other offenses. And if you look at countries where there is a lot of crime, a lot of murder, a lot of other things, so the courts are clogged up with a lot of other serious crimes, special drink driving courts or traffic courts are very good. Another reason why they're very good is that the public prosecutors can be then trained about alcohol elimination rates, the risks about alcoholics compared to social drinkers. The magistrates and the judges will learn more about this. So there is less chance for the offender to get away with drinking and driving. One needs to make tests for both driver for alcohol at all crash scenes. This law needs to be mandatory so that we get accurate statistics. Treatment of repeat offenders. Alcohol training schools are used, and they do really help. Diversion programs are not as effective. So, for example, a diversion program where someone isn't given a criminal record, but they are diverted to a program. In many of these diversion programs, that information is then not captured or shared state to state. So one might go into a diversion program in one state, and then they move to another state to work, and then they could be offender again. Now, because it's not captured, then they are seen as a first-time offender, and so they can go into a diversion program. They could then move to another state and go into as a first-time offender. So diversion programs work, certainly in the US, they seem to be used mainly for the young offenders, people under the age of 21, and that data is then collected and it is shared on a national registry all over the country, so that they can see if they are repeat offenders. Alcohol ignition interlocks are also very interesting and useful. They can be introduced especially for convicted drink drivers. They are used a lot in the United States and in Australia and various other countries. One of the reasons they are very good is that basically if the person tries to drive the next day and they blow into the breathalyzer and they're over the legal limit, the vehicle will not start. It is also very good to teach them it helps to teach about elimination rates. It also helps to bring down alcohol abuse in the homes, and it brings down the drink driving while the person is using the alcohol interlocks. But after that, they are not as effective, but they are just one of the tools that can be used. Restriction on young or inexperienced drivers, graduated driver licensing, 0% alcohol, designated driver and ride service programs. These are used in quite a few countries, Australia, New Zealand, pushing for designated drivers in some country where the designated driver is then not allowed to drink at the pub, and they are given a special badge and they are given free cool drinks. So some of those will work to reduce drink driving. If you look at our 4 E's, education, engineering, enforcement, and evaluation, of the 4 E's, enforcement is the most important element. So you need to look, are your drunk driving laws best practice in terms of BAC levels, professional and novice BAC levels? Lobby Parliament to change the laws then, read the BAC levels, to have more roadblocks and random testing and harsher convictions. Look at, are evidential breath testers, EBATs, legal in your country? If not, lobby for them. Are alcohol ignition interlocks legal? If not, lobby for EBATs and for interlocks, especially for alcohol-dependent people. So good political will and road safety officials being committed to testing and harsher sentences will help to deter people from driving under the influence. Generally, many drink drivers get away with it, and not guilty versions are given due to lack of evidence, lack of forms filled in correctly, or lack of documentation, poor police work, inadequate training of investigators, no or bad post-crash investigations, at crash scene, no automatic testing for alcohol and drugs, lack of understanding of the seriousness of road crimes, political indifference, records missing or bribery. And this, of course, is very different to proving a driver's innocence. How should NGO approach driving under the influence? Advocacy. We need to make the police, governments, and people know that DUI is a serious crime that needs more attention. We need accurate statistics on the effect of DUI on the economy. We need to work out the economic cost of loss of lives because of DUI and show government that buying testing equipment and doing more tests will save lives, money, and emotional trauma. So basically, we need to convince the governments that they actually need to spend money to save money and to save heartache. So as NGOs, we need to post many more articles on DUI on social media, in the newspaper. We need to share the stories about the victims. We need to assist the victims at court cases and get the media involved. Because in general, there is often a lot of sympathy for the accused, but the victims who have died are often forgotten about. And some of this happens because people say, oh, it could have been me who had killed that person. I have driven under the influence in the past many times. So they tend to feel sorry for the accused and forget about the victims and the effect that getting sentences can act on deterrence. So thank you very much. You can always contact me on these details. There's my website, there's my email address. We have manuals for universities, we have manuals for schools, for doctors and emergency departments, and I would be very, very happy to share all the information that we have. It doesn't mean these manuals are absolutely, the best in the world, but they might be a starting point for you to take and adapt it for your own country. So thank you very much, and it's wonderful to work with all the people at the Global Alliance and all you NGOs, and I send you all my best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Caro, for sharing your knowledge with us. This webinar is available on our website and YouTube channel, and you can go back and listen to it as many times as you like. Should you wish to learn more, we have collected a number of resources which can be found on our website. Thank you for listening and have a safe day.